Come closer, beloved. Sit with me now in the fields where the golden grasses sway gently under God's breath. Tonight you are not merely a passerby. You are invited, chosen to find rest under the shelter of His presence. The world behind you hums and fades. The worries that tried to cling to you fall away like dust. Here, in the quiet field of God's love, we will walk together through the stories of old, not as distant tales, but as living memories woven into your own soul. And so, we begin. Long ago, there was a boy named David. He was not yet a king, nor a hero sung in mighty songs. No, tonight, we meet him in his most fragile hour. A boy hiding in the darkness of a cave, with nothing but the trembling lamp of faith to light his heart. He had fled from Saul, the king who once loved him, now hunting him with bitter jealousy. David's feet were blistered, his spirit worn thin, and yet, even as he pressed his back against the cold stone walls of Adullam's cave, he whispered prayers into the silence. "You are my refuge," David murmured, heart pounding. "You are my portion in the land of the living." Outside the cave, shadows moved, soldiers perhaps, or the howl of wild beasts. Fear clawed at the edges of his mind, yet David clung to his harp and his God more tightly than to his own safety. The cave became a sanctuary, not because it was made of stone, but because it was filled with trust. Tonight, you too are in your own cave, in your own silent hour, and like David, you are not forgotten. The same God who guarded a frightened boy in the wilderness now watches over you. Feel the soft hush of the night air wrapping around you like a cloak. Listen to the quiet hum of eternity whispering just beyond the veil. David survived that night, and the next, and the next, until the caves that once felt like prisons became the place where he was molded into a king. So, beloved, what seems like a wilderness in your life may yet be the womb of your becoming. Do not fear the caves, rest in them, because in the darkness God is doing His greatest work. Tonight we rest, tonight we remember, tonight we trust. Come, there are more stories to tell, more lights to find in the valleys of the night. Close your eyes now, and let the journey continue. The night deepens and the fields of rest sway softly around you. Breathe in the hush of this hour, where the winds carry not just the scent of rain and earth, but the very voice of God, if you are still enough to listen. Now, let me tell you of Elijah. Elijah, the prophet of fire, the man who called down flames from heaven itself. He too had a night of fear. He too once fled into the wilderness, hollowed by sorrow, hunted by a queen who thirsted for his life. He ran until he could run no more. He collapsed beneath a lone broom tree in the desert, face buried in the dust, and he cried out to the heavens, "It is enough now, O Lord. Take my life, for I am no better than my ancestors." Despair is a heavy cloak, and even the strongest of hearts can feel its weight. But God, in His endless kindness, did not rebuke Elijah. He did not scold him for his weakness. Instead, He sent an angel to touch him, once, then again, and whisper, "Arise and eat, for the journey is too great for you." So Elijah ate and drank and rested, and then, guided by unseen hands, he traveled to Mount Horeb, the mountain of God. There, in a cave carved by ancient winds, Elijah waited. He needed to hear from the Lord, yet his heart was a trembling leaf. Would God come with thunder, with raging fire, with earth-shaking storms? Suddenly, the mountain quaked under his feet. A great wind tore across the cliffs, splitting the stones. But the Lord was not in the wind. Then fire blazed through the sky, crackling and consuming all before it. But the Lord was not in the fire. And then the earth itself groaned and trembled. Rocks shuddered and rivers cracked. But the Lord was not in the earthquake. Finally, there came a sound. Not a roar, not a blast, not a cry, just a whisper, a still small voice. And Elijah, the mighty prophet, wrapped his cloak around his face and stepped out to meet the God who spoke not through might, but through mercy. Beloved, do you see? God does not always answer us in explosions and miracles. He often speaks in the quiet, in the moments when we are still enough, desperate enough, soft enough to hear. You are here tonight, not to wrestle answers from the sky. You are here to listen. Breathe again. Let the air fill your chest, like a river filling a thirsty land. You are not forsaken in your silence. You are not abandoned in your stillness. The same God who whispered to Elijah now whispers over you. I am here. I have always been here. The night is not a curse. It is a canvas. The silence is not your enemy. It is an invitation. Be still and know the journey continues, beloved. The next story waits just beyond the mist. The night grows deeper, but the peace only settles further into your bones. The sky above is heavy with stars, and the fields stretch far and wide, golden even beneath the veil of darkness. Listen, beloved. Tonight, let me take you to another field. Not empty, but waiting. It is the time of harvest, and in the small land of Bethlehem, a woman named Ruth gathers fallen grains beneath the wide, watching sky. Ruth was not born among God's chosen people. She came from Moab, a place often forgotten, sometimes despised. But Ruth had made a choice, a quiet promise whispered into the folds of grief. She had left behind her homeland, her gods, her old life, all because of love, a fierce, humble love for her mother-in-law, Naomi. Where you go, I will go, Ruth had said. Where you stay, I will stay. Your people will be my people, and your God will be my God. Such vows are not made with loud trumpets or grand gestures. They are made in the still corners of the heart, where loyalty is born and faith is shaped. Now, under the watchful eyes of heaven, Ruth bends low in the fields of Boaz. The work is hard. The ground is rough. The harvesters barely notice the foreign woman gleaning at the edges, but God notices. And Boaz, a man of kindness, a man of wisdom, notices too. Stay close to my servant girls, Boaz says to her, his voice wrapped in gentle strength. When you are thirsty, drink from the jars they have filled. Simple mercies, small kindnesses, but each one is a stone laid into the path of a much larger story. For Ruth, the outsider, the foreigner, the quiet one, would one day become the great-grandmother of David, the shepherd boy who became king. And through David would come the lineage of Jesus Christ himself, all because of one quiet vow, all because of one unwavering promise, whispered under the stars. Beloved, you may feel small tonight. You may wonder if your choices, your sacrifices, your loyalty even matter. But let Ruth's story settle into your heart, like rain into thirsty soil. Faithfulness in the unseen places leads to fruitfulness in the vast places. Your quiet yes to God, even when no one else notices, moves the heavens. The grain she gathered was just the beginning. The destiny she carried would one day shake the gates of time. And tonight, in your own quiet field, you are seen too. Every prayer, every tear, every step forward in faith. He sees, he remembers. He is building something beautiful even now. Even if your hands feel empty, rest in the field tonight. The harvest is coming. The night settles thicker now, like a heavy but gentle blanket across the fields. The stars above seem to lean closer, as if they too wish to hear the stories whispered through the dark. And so we walk onward to another tale, a story of betrayal, of broken dreams, and of forgiveness too deep for words. Joseph, the boy with the many-colored coat, the dreamer who saw stars bowing, who saw sheaves of wheat bending low. But dreams can become prisons too, can't they? His brothers, burning with jealousy, tore the coat from his shoulders and threw him into a pit. Their own flesh and blood, sold for silver, carried away into a foreign land, Egypt, a land of strange gods and unfamiliar tongues, a land where Joseph would be enslaved, then imprisoned, then forgotten by the very ones he helped. Years passed, dreams faded. Yet Joseph, alone, bruised, unseen, held on to a thread of hope, a thread woven by unseen hands. The Lord was with Joseph, Scripture tells us, even when no one else was. In the dark of Pharaoh's dungeons, Joseph learned not just to interpret dreams, but to trust the giver of dreams beyond understanding. And when at last the tides of destiny turned, Joseph was lifted high, second only to Pharaoh himself, to save not only Egypt, but the very brothers who had betrayed him. Imagine that moment. The famine drove his brothers to Egypt, desperate and trembling, standing unknowingly before the brother they had once abandoned. Joseph had the power to destroy them. He had the right to revenge. Yet he chose something greater, something higher than any throne. He chose forgiveness. "You meant evil against me," Joseph said, voice trembling with unshed tears. "But God meant it for good, to bring it about that many people should be kept alive." Beloved, can you hear the soft song hidden in that moment? The story of your life is bigger than the betrayals you have suffered. The pit is not the end. The prison is not the final word. God is weaving even the broken threads into a tapestry more radiant than anything you could imagine. Tonight, as you lie here, breathing in the peace of this field, remember, the hands that were against you do not have the last say. The hands that formed the stars, the hands that held Joseph steady through slavery and sorrow, those are the same hands holding you tonight. Forgiveness is not weakness, it is the triumph of heaven over the scars of earth. Release what was broken into his hands, dream again, hope again. Because the journey does not end in the pit, it ends in the palace, where healing reigns and love restores. The night draws deeper still. The stars above shimmer through a mist of clouds, like watchful eyes never blinking, never weary. The stories weave together into a soft blanket of memory. David in his cave, Elijah on his mountain, Ruth in the fields, Joseph in the palace. And now we come to the edge of a great lake, dark and restless beneath the night sky, the Sea of Galilee, and a small boat rocking dangerously among the waves. Inside the boat are men, fishermen, rough and calloused, yet tonight they are little more than frightened boys. The storm came fast, as it often does on Galilee, winds howling, waves crashing, darkness pressing in from every side. Water fills the boat, voices rise in panic. And where is Jesus? He sleeps, in the stern, head on a pillow, unbothered by the chaos tearing around them. "Teacher," they cry out, voices breaking with terror, "do you not care that we are perishing?" Such a cry, beloved. How many times have we whispered it ourselves, through our tears? "Lord, don't you see me drowning? Don't you hear the storm that threatens to tear my life apart?" But Jesus, beautiful sovereign Jesus, rises from his slumber. He stands in the midst of the storm, calm as the deep places of the sea, and with a voice that still echoes through the corridors of time, he speaks, "Peace, be still." The winds falter, the waves hush like chastened children, and suddenly there is a great calm. The disciples stare, wide-eyed, hearts pounding, not with fear now, but with awe. "Who is this?" they whisper, "that even the wind and the waves obey him?" He is the same one who walks beside you tonight, the same one who sees the storms raging in your mind, your heart, your life, the same one who can silence the chaos with a word. Beloved, listen, It is not the size of your storm that matters, it is the size of your Savior. You may feel small in the rising seas, you may feel powerless against the winds, but the one who commands the oceans stands with you. He has not forgotten you. He is not asleep to your cries. And even if he allows the storm to rise, it is only so you can see his power all the more clearly. Tonight, as you rest under the vastness of his sky, know this: the winds still obey him, the waves still kneel at his feet, and your heart, fragile, battered, beloved, is held safely in his hands. Rest now, child of the storm. The peace he gives is not the peace the world offers. It is deeper, it is stronger, it is eternal, and it is yours tonight. Far from the roaring seas and rushing winds, there was once a woman who carried a different kind of storm. A silent ache, a longing so deep, it echoed louder than any thunder. Her name was Hannah. In the ancient town of Shiloh, year after year, Hannah journeyed with her husband to offer sacrifices at the house of the Lord. Families gathered, feasts were shared, prayers rose like smoke into the heavens. And yet for Hannah, each year was a reminder of what she lacked, a child of her own. The whispers of others stung sharper than thorns. The empty place at her table gnawed at the edges of her heart. Still, she came. Still, she prayed. One year, burdened beyond what her soul could carry, she slipped away from the feasting and found herself alone before the Lord's house. There her lips moved with desperate petitions, but no sound escaped. Tears streamed down her face as she poured out every hidden sorrow. "Lord Almighty," she whispered within, "if you will only look on your servant's misery and remember me." The priest Eli, seeing her lips move but hearing no voice, misunderstood her, thought her drunk, and scolded her. But Hannah, with trembling voice, replied, "I am a woman deeply troubled. I have been pouring out my soul before the Lord." Eli's heart softened. He blessed her, sending her away with a word of hope. And Hannah, though nothing had yet changed, rose and returned to her family with her heart lighter than before, because she had laid her pain at the feet of the one who truly sees. Not long after, the Lord remembered her. Her arms, once empty, were filled with a son, Samuel, who would grow to become one of Israel's greatest prophets. All because one woman dared to trust God with the deepest cries of her soul. Beloved, what burdens do you carry into the silent spaces of your heart? What prayers have you whispered that seemed unanswered, unseen, unheard? Let Hannah's story wrap around you tonight. God does not need grand declarations to move. He hears the trembling prayers. He sees the silent tears. He bends low to gather every word, every ache, every longing. The emptiness you feel is not a curse. It is a space he intends to fill with his own miracles. Do not be afraid to pray without eloquence. Do not be ashamed to weep without words. The God of Hannah is the same God who leans close to you now. Lay your burdens down in the quiet fields of his mercy. Hope again, trust again, for he remembers his beloved ones. He remembers you. Along the dusty roads of Galilee, where crowds pressed thick and hope flickered thin, there moved a woman whose story was wrapped not in triumph, but in quiet desperation. Her name has been forgotten by history, but her faith never was. For 12 long years, she had suffered, not from a visible wound, not from a broken bone, but from a bleeding that would not cease, a slow, invisible drain of life and dignity. Doctors had failed her. Her savings were gone. The whispers behind her back burned worse than the disease itself. She was called unclean, untouchable. In her world she was a ghost, moving unseen through streets and doorways, carrying sorrow like a second skin. But then word reached her, a whisper, barely daring to hope. Jesus is coming. The man who healed the sick, who touched lepers without fear, who looked into the faces of the forgotten with eyes full of compassion. Jesus. She wrapped her shawl tighter around her thin shoulders. She gathered the last of her strength. And she went. The crowd was overwhelming. Voices shouting, bodies pressing. But she had made a vow in the secret places of her heart. If I can just touch the hem of his garment, I will be healed. Not his hand, not his face, not even his voice. Just the edge of his cloak. That was enough. She pushed through the bodies, her hands trembling, her breath short. And then, with one final desperate stretch, her fingers brushed the coarse fabric of his robe. Immediately she felt it. Not a wave of light, not a clap of thunder, but a deep, certain knowing that the bleeding had stopped, that her body was whole again. Jesus stopped. He turned in the middle of the jostling crowd, his eyes searching. "Who touched me?" he asked. The disciples laughed nervously. "Master, the crowd presses around you. How can you ask who touched you?" But Jesus knew. Faith had reached him through the chaos. The woman, trembling, came forward and fell at his feet. She told him everything. And in the presence of the multitude that had once ignored her, Jesus spoke words that would ring through the corridors of eternity. "Daughter, your faith has made you well. Go in peace." Daughter, not outcast, not forgotten, not cursed. Daughter, beloved, you who feel invisible tonight, you who have fought battles no one else sees, know this. Your faith, however small, however trembling, is seen. You are not lost in the crowd. You are not another forgotten face among millions. When you reach for him, even if it is only for the edge of his robe, he stops. He turns. He sees you. He calls you his own. Tonight, in the quiet, brush your heart once more against his garment. You do not need to shout to be heard. You only need to reach. Far away from cities and crowds, where only the hills rolled like soft waves under the sun, there lived a shepherd, not a man of great renown, not a warrior or a king, just a shepherd, quiet, patient, unseen. Each morning, he led his flock into the grassy fields. Each night, he counted them carefully as they returned, one by one, into the safety of the fold. 99 sheep, each with their own small stubbornness, their own needs, their own bleating cries. And then, one night, he counted again, and one was missing. Perhaps another man would have shrugged. "It's only one. The others are safe." Perhaps another man would have reasoned, "It's too dangerous. It's too dark. It's too late." But not this shepherd. Without hesitation, he wrapped his cloak tighter around his shoulders, took up his staff, and set out into the night. Over rocky hills, through thorns and shadows, past dangers that whispered and rustled in the darkness, he searched. Not because the sheep was valuable to anyone else, but because it was precious to him. And when he found it, trembling, tangled, wounded, he did not scold it. He did not punish it. He lifted it onto his shoulders, speaking comfort into the trembling wool. He carried it all the way home, and when he returned, he called out to his friends and neighbors, "Rejoice with me, for I have found my sheep that was lost." Beloved, do you see? You are not just one among many. You are the one he would leave the 99 to find. You are the one he braved the thorns and shadows to rescue. You are the one he lifts onto his shoulders, speaking peace over your bruised spirit. Maybe tonight you feel far away. Maybe you have wandered so long that you fear even God has forgotten where you are. But hear this, he is searching, not with anger, not with condemnation, but with relentless love. A love that knows no distance too far, no darkness too thick, no brokenness too deep. He sees where you are, even if you no longer do, and he is coming for you, not to shame you, not to punish you, but to carry you home. Let him find you tonight, beloved. Let yourself be lifted onto his strong, gentle shoulders. Rest there. For you are the sheep he treasures. You are the song of rejoicing, waiting to be sung in heaven. And your journey is not over yet. It has only just begun. In a courtyard dimly lit by flickering firelight, a man sat shivering, not from the cold, but from a fear that gnawed deeper than any winter night could reach. Peter, the bold one, the one who had sworn loyalty louder than all the rest, the one who had drawn his sword in the garden, ready to defend his master even unto death. But now Jesus had been arrested. The mob had come with swords and clubs, and the world had tilted into chaos. And Peter, brave Peter, had run. Now he sat by the fire, trying to blend into the shadows, trying to quiet the pounding of his heart. The servants around him spoke in low, suspicious tones, and then the words that shattered him. "You were with him," one said, pointing through the smoke. "You were with Jesus of Nazareth." Peter's mouth moved before his mind could catch up. "I don't know what you're talking about," he said. "A lie. The first of three." Again, another voice, different, but equally sure. "You are one of them." Again, Peter denied it, his voice cracking with the strain of fear. The minutes dragged like hours, and then a third voice, insisting, accusing. "Surely you are one of them, for your accent betrays you." This time Peter cursed, swearing with words he had long abandoned as a fisherman. "I do not know the man." And at that very moment, as the final denial slipped from his lips, the rooster crowed, just as Jesus had said it would. Across the courtyard, perhaps through the swirl of bodies and shadows, their eyes met. Jesus, bound and beaten, looked at Peter, not with anger, not with condemnation, but with sorrow, with love too deep for words, with a heartbreak that pierced through bone and spirit. Peter stumbled away from the fire, away from the crowd, away from the sound of the crowing. He found a dark corner and wept. Great, racking sobs that tore through him like a storm, the kind of tears that cannot be spoken, only surrendered. Beloved, how many times have we stood where Peter stood? How many promises have we broken in fear? How many times have we denied the love we once declared with boldness? And yet, even then, he looks at us, not with scorn, not with disgust, but with the eyes of a shepherd who knows his sheep will stumble and loves them still. Peter's story did not end in the courtyard. The man who wept in shame would one day stand in power, proclaiming the name of Jesus to thousands. The one who denied would become the one who declared. And so it is with you. Your failure is not your finale. Your fear is not the measure of your future. Tonight, as the firelight dances and the memories flicker across your heart, know this: he sees you, he still calls you, he still loves you, and the same Savior who met Peter in his brokenness now waits to restore you with the same infinite grace. Beyond the heavy columns of the temple, where the sunlight filtered in muted beams, a quiet moment unfolded that the world almost missed. No trumpets, no great announcements, no grand entrances. Only a woman, old, worn, wrapped in a simple cloak, moving with slow, careful steps. She was a widow. In her world, that meant more than sorrow. It meant vulnerability, poverty, invisibility. There were no pensions, no safety nets, only the mercy of strangers and the scraps of generosity offered in passing. And yet, she came. She came to the place where the wealthy paraded their offerings, where gold and silver clinked loudly into heavy jars, each gift a small performance of righteousness. She slipped through the crowds unnoticed. No one turned their head. No one marveled. In her hand, she carried only 2 small copper coins, barely worth a whisper. She could have turned back. She could have hidden them away, embarrassed by their insignificance, but instead she approached the offering box with a courage few could see. Her hands, weathered and trembling, opened, and with a soft clink, so quiet it might have been lost in the noise, she dropped both coins inside, all she had to live on. It was over in a moment. No applause, no celebration. She turned to leave, disappearing into the crowds once more, but Jesus saw her. Across the temple courts, his eyes that missed nothing, were fixed not on the rich and their heavy purses, but on her. He called his disciples to him, his voice filled with a quiet awe. Truly I tell you, this poor widow has put in more than all the others. They gave out of their wealth, but she, out of her poverty, put in all she had to live on. Beloved, the world measures worth by weight, by size, by spectacle, but the kingdom of God measures by heart, by love, by sacrifice. It is not the amount in your hand that matters tonight. It is the faith it carries. Maybe your prayers feel small. Maybe your faith feels like 2 thin copper coins. Not much, not impressive, barely noticeable. But when you offer them with an open heart, when you give him everything you have, no matter how humble, he sees, he knows. And in his eyes, it is worth more than mountains of gold. Tonight, in the quiet fields of his grace, you are invited to bring what you have. Bring your smallness, bring your brokenness, bring your 2 coins of hope and trust. Lay them before him without shame. And know that heaven leans closer to listen to the soft clink of your faith falling into his hands. Nothing is wasted. Nothing is too small. He sees it all, and he smiles. Rest in that truth tonight. You are seen. You are known. You are beloved. Far from the courts of Egypt, where gold gleamed and armies marched, there stretched a barren wilderness, a land of dust, thorn, and silence. And it was here, not in the splendor of palaces, that Moses found himself, a shepherd now, not a prince. Day after day, he led flocks across the empty spaces, his sandals worn thin, his face weathered by sun and wind. 40 years passed like a slow river carving stone. The dreams of youth, the ambitions of strength, they had long since dried up under the desert sun. But God was not finished with Moses, and he was about to call him in a way so strange, so unexpected, that the memory would burn brighter than the desert itself. One day, while tending his sheep near Mount Horeb, Moses noticed something unusual. A bush, a flame. Its branches crackled and danced with fire, and yet the bush itself was not consumed. Curiosity stirred in his weary heart. He turned aside, stepping closer, and from the heart of the flame came a voice that trembled with power and tenderness alike. Moses, Moses, Moses. Froze. Here I am, he replied, voice barely more than a whisper. Do not come any closer, the voice said. Take off your sandals, for the place where you are standing is holy ground. Moses obeyed, the dust of the earth clinging to his bare feet, the weight of something greater than fear pressing into his chest. I am the God of your father, the God of Abraham, the God of Isaac, the God of Jacob. And Moses hid his face, for he was afraid to look at God. But the voice continued, not with thunder, not with condemnation, but with a declaration of mercy. I have seen the misery of my people in Egypt. I have heard their cries. I am concerned about their suffering. So I have come down to rescue them. And then, the unimaginable, now go. I am sending you to Pharaoh to bring my people out of Egypt. Moses, once bold, once mighty, now stammered. Who am I, he said, that I should go to Pharaoh and bring the Israelites out of Egypt? And God answered simply, I will be with you. Not you are enough, not you are strong enough, but I will be with you. Beloved, How often do we feel like Moses, worn down by years, defined by failure, convinced we are too broken, too small to be used? But God does not call the qualified. He qualifies the called. He does not ask for perfect strength. He asks for willingness. Tonight, as you sit under the wide canopy of His mercy, know this: the same voice that called to Moses from the burning bush calls softly to you now, not with demands, not with accusations, but with the simple, stunning invitation: come closer, take off your shoes, lay down your excuses, and listen. There is holy ground beneath your feet, even here, even now. You are not forgotten in the wilderness. You are being prepared for wonders you cannot yet imagine. Far from the noise of courts and kings, in a small, forgotten village tucked between dusty hills, there lived a girl named Mary. She was not extraordinary by the world's measure. No wealth, no fame, just a simple life, a simple heart. And yet, the eyes of heaven were upon her. One quiet evening, when the streets were still and the world was wrapped in ordinary worries, Mary's world changed forever. A light, brighter than any flame, shimmered into the room, and before her stood an angel, Gabriel, radiant and fierce and beautiful. "Greetings, favored one," he said. "The Lord is with you." Mary's heart raced. She stepped back, fear swirling inside her like a sudden storm. But Gabriel smiled, his voice a balm to her trembling soul. "Do not be afraid, Mary. You have found favor with God. You will conceive and give birth to a son, and you are to call him Jesus." The words hung in the air, impossible, staggering. "He will be great," the angel continued, "and will be called the Son of the Most High." Mary, barely more than a girl, living in the smallness of Nazareth, was being asked to carry the hope of the entire world. "How can this be?" she whispered, her voice cracking under the weight of the moment. Gabriel answered gently, "The Holy Spirit will come upon you, and the power of the Most High will overshadow you, for nothing will be impossible with God." And there, in that small room, with no witnesses, no fanfare, no guarantees, Mary made her choice. A choice that would ripple across eternity. "I am the Lord's servant," she said. "May it be to me as you have said." Beloved, what quiet invitations is God whispering into your heart tonight? What impossible callings are stirring in the hidden places? Like Mary, you may feel too small, too unprepared, too ordinary. But heaven does not measure as earth does. Faith is born not in certainty, but in surrender. Mary did not understand all that was being asked. She did not know the pain that would come, the sword that would pierce her heart. She only knew the one who was asking, and that was enough. Tonight, beneath the hush of this moment, you are invited to trust when you cannot see the whole road, to say yes when everything inside you trembles, to believe that the smallest act of surrender can set kingdoms into motion. You do not have to be mighty. You only have to be willing. And the God who overshadowed Mary with His Spirit will overshadow you too. Breathe deep, beloved. Your quiet yes is louder in heaven than all the armies of the earth. Beyond the crowded streets and the temple courts, there lies another kind of story, a story of a reluctant heart and a relentless God. Jonah, the prophet who ran, not because he feared the danger, but because he feared the mercy. You see, God had called Jonah to Nineveh, a city thick with violence, pride, and sin. He was told to go to preach repentance to a people he despised, to offer forgiveness to those he wished judged. And Jonah, strong-willed, stubborn Jonah, boarded a ship in the opposite direction, away from Nineveh, away from the call. But you cannot outrun the voice that formed the oceans. The storm came swiftly. Waves towered. Fear broke through the bravado of hardened sailors. Jonah, burdened with guilt, knew the cause. He offered himself as sacrifice, hurled into the roaring sea. And there, swallowed by a great fish, in the belly of darkness itself, Jonah prayed. He surrendered. And after 3 days, 3 long days wrapped in salt and silence, the fish released him onto dry land. And Jonah, weary and broken, obeyed. He walked the streets of Nineveh, his voice rough with salt and sand, proclaiming the warning of God. And to his astonishment, to his frustration, the people listened. They repented. They clothed themselves in ashes and prayers. And God, rich in mercy, forgave them. But Jonah was not rejoicing. He was angry. He left the city and built himself a shelter, sitting under it in the desert sun, waiting, perhaps still hoping, for judgment to fall. And God, in his tenderness, caused a vine to grow overnight, its broad leaves casting cool shade over Jonah's head. For a moment, Jonah's heart softened. He was grateful for the vine, for the comfort. But by morning, God sent a worm, and the vine withered. The sun beat down. The east wind blew hot and merciless, and Jonah grew faint, furious over the loss of his shade. Then God spoke. "You are concerned about the vine," he said, "though you did not tend it or make it grow. Should I not be concerned about Nineveh, that great city, in which there are more than 120,000 people who cannot tell their right hand from their left?" Beloved, how often are our hearts like Jonah's, clinging to comfort, withholding mercy, grieving over small losses while forgetting the vastness of God's compassion? Tonight, under the quiet skies, let us ask ourselves, have we built shelters of judgment where God calls us to build altars of grace? Are we mourning vines while heaven weeps over cities? The God who forgave Nineveh is the God who forgives you. He does not ask for perfection. He asks for hearts willing to be broken open by compassion. He asks for eyes that see beyond the smallness of our comfort to the vastness of his love. Tonight, release your vines. Let go of the shadows you cling to. Step out into the wide mercy of God, where even the worst among us are not beyond redemption, where even the most stubborn hearts can be reshaped, where even the runners can be welcomed home. The streets of Jericho buzzed with life. Merchants called out, children darted between stalls, and the smell of bread and spices filled the warm air. And above the noise, above the crowd, perched in the branches of a broad sycamore tree, sat a man who had spent his life looking down on others, and now, for the first time, looked up for something greater. Zacchaeus, chief tax collector, wealthy, despised, feared. His fortune had been built on the suffering of his neighbors, each coin a reminder of betrayal and greed. He had climbed the ladder of power, only to find himself lonelier at the top than he had ever been at the bottom. But something had stirred in him when he heard the name whispered through the marketplace. Jesus is coming, the healer, the teacher, the man who welcomed sinners and spoke with the authority of heaven itself. Zacchaeus was small in stature, but it was not only his height that made it hard to see. The walls he had built around his heart were just as tall, just as thick. Still, curiosity pulled him forward. He ran ahead of the crowd, an undignified act for a man of his position, and scrambled up into a tree. From his perch among the branches he watched, and then, to his amazement, Jesus stopped, right beneath the tree. He looked up. Their eyes met, a gaze that seemed to pierce through all the years of deception and loneliness. "Zacchaeus," Jesus called, "come down immediately. I must stay at your house today." The crowd murmured in shock. Outrage rippled through the streets. "He's going to eat with a sinner," they whispered, scandalized. But Zacchaeus didn't care. He scrambled down from the tree, heart pounding, soul trembling. And somewhere between the branches and the dust of the street, something inside him broke open. "Look, Lord," he said, standing before the Savior who had seen him, truly seen him. "Here and now I give half of my possessions to the poor, and if I have cheated anybody out of anything, I will pay back 4 times the amount." And Jesus, with a smile as bright as morning, proclaimed, "Today salvation has come to this house. Beloved, hear this, you are never too lost to be found. You are never too corrupt to be called. You are never too far gone to be welcomed home. It does not matter how high the walls you've built. It does not matter how tangled the branches you hide among. He sees you, he calls you, he invites himself into your broken places, not to shame you, but to redeem you. Tonight, if you feel hidden, if you feel trapped among the branches of regret and fear, listen closely. He is standing beneath your tree. He is calling your name. "Come down," he says. "I must stay with you today." And when you answer, when you open your heart, however battered, however ashamed, you will find what Zacchaeus found: not judgment, not rejection, but salvation, and a love that turns even the most tangled life into a testimony of grace. High on a barren hill, under a sky bruised by grief and rage, 3 crosses stood. 3 bodies hung in the burning light of a world that had turned its face away. In the center, Jesus, and on either side, 2 thieves, 2 men, bound not just by ropes and nails, but by the weight of lives misspent. The first thief hurled insults, even in the agony of his final hours. Bitterness had hardened his heart, long before the nails pierced his flesh. "Aren't you the Messiah?" he spat. "Save yourself and us." But the second thief, he was different. He did not scream. He did not curse the sky. Somewhere in the depths of his suffering, he saw something the crowd had missed. He saw not a broken man, but a broken heart poured out for the world. He saw not a criminal gasping for life, but a king laying down his crown for the sake of love. Turning his head, with what little strength he had left, he spoke, not with eloquence, but with desperation. "Jesus, remember me when you come into your kingdom." Just a whisper, just a breath between death and eternity. And Jesus, battered and bleeding, wearing a crown of thorns instead of gold, turned his face toward him, and he spoke words that have echoed through every aching soul since, "Truly I tell you, today you will be with me in paradise." No long confession, no list of good deeds, no grand final act, only a heart turned toward grace, only a plea whispered into mercy's waiting arms. Beloved, hear this truth. It is never too late, not for the broken, not for the dying, not even for you. One breath, one turn of the heart, and eternity shifts. Tonight, maybe you feel like that thief, ashamed, spent, hanging on the fragile edge of hope. Maybe you wonder if it's too late to be seen, too late to be remembered. But the same Jesus who heard the whisper from that cross, the same Savior who promised paradise to a dying criminal, hears your whisper too. He does not ask for perfect prayers. He does not demand spotless hands. He only asks for the reaching, the heart stretched out in fragile trust. Remember me, you can pray tonight, and know, without doubt, he already has. You are already etched into his heart, already held within his love. The door of paradise is not closed. It is swung wide on the broken hinges of a cross. Step through it tonight, beloved. Step through it and find rest. The city gates buzzed with life. Merchants shouting, children laughing, travelers coming and going with heavy steps and heavier burdens. But just beyond the busy feet, seated in the dust where few cared to look, sat a man wrapped in darkness. His name was Bartimaeus, blind from birth, begging for survival, invisible to those rushing past him, day after day. To the world he was just another voice in the noise, another hand outstretched, another mouth crying out for spare coins. But Bartimaeus carried something that few around him did, a desperate, stubborn faith. One day, above the clamor of the crowds, he heard a name whispered with awe. Jesus of Nazareth. Something within him leapt. Hope stirred where only dust had lived before. And without hesitation, without dignity, without care for how foolish he might seem, he began to shout, "Jesus, Son of David, have mercy on me." The crowd turned on him. "Be quiet," they hissed, embarrassed by his noise, annoyed by his desperation. But Bartimaeus would not be silenced. He cried out even louder, "Son of David, have mercy on me." And Jesus, amid all the movement, all the voices, stopped. He stopped for one voice among hundreds. "Call him," Jesus said. And suddenly the crowd, who had moments ago rebuked him, now said, "Cheer up, on your feet. He's calling you." Bartimaeus threw aside his cloak, the only possession he had to his name, and stumbled forward, led by trembling hands toward the sound of mercy. Jesus asked him, "What do you want me to do for you?" The answer burst forth from the deepest places of his soul, "Rabbi, I want to see." And with a touch, with a word, with the simple breath of divine compassion, his sight was restored. The world exploded into color and light, and the first face Bartimaeus ever saw was the face of love himself. He did not hesitate. He followed Jesus immediately, leaving behind the old life of shadows. Beloved, what are you still clinging to in the dust? What hopes have you silenced because the world told you it was foolish to cry out? Tonight, let Bartimaeus's courage breathe life back into your spirit. Cry out, even when the crowd says you're not worth it, even when the world tries to hush your hunger. Cry out. He is listening. He stops for the desperate. He turns toward the persistent. He honors the voice that refuses to be drowned by fear. You are not invisible. Your cries are not lost in the noise. Tonight, your heart can rise from the dust. Tonight, the cloak of old shame can fall from your shoulders. Tonight, you can walk, not in blindness, but in the blazing light of his love. Cheer up, beloved, on your feet. He is calling you. Beyond the stone walls of cities, out where the earth cracked under the noonday sun, there stood a well, ancient, deep, forgotten by many, but vital to those who still traveled the dusty paths. And one day, under the harsh glare of noon, a woman came to draw water. Most came early in the morning or late in the evening, when the heat was gentler and the crowds kinder, but she came when no one else would be there. The whispers followed her like shadows. 5 husbands, shame woven into the hem of her dress, too heavy to shake off. She lowered her jar into the dark mouth of the well, perhaps grateful for the solitude. But that day she was not alone. A man sat nearby, a Jewish man, and to her astonishment, he spoke. "Will you give me a drink?" The woman blinked, confusion flickering across her face. Jews did not speak to Samaritans. Men did not speak to women alone. Strangers did not offer kindness to the broken. And yet there he sat, no judgment in his eyes, no ridicule in his voice. She challenged him, wary, sharp from years of survival. "You are a Jew, and I am a Samaritan woman. How can you ask me for a drink?" But Jesus was not deterred. "If you knew the gift of God," he said, "and who it is that asks you for a drink, you would have asked him, and he would have given you living water." Living water. The words shimmered in the heat, strange and beautiful. She clung to the practical. "You have nothing to draw with." The well is deep, but he was speaking of a deeper thirst. Everyone who drinks this water will be thirsty again, he said. But whoever drinks the water I give them will never thirst. Her heart, parched from years of longing and disappointment, cracked open just a little. "Sir, give me this water," she whispered. And then, with a tenderness sharper than any sword, Jesus peeled back the layers she had wrapped around herself. "Go, call your husband." Her throat tightened. "I have no husband," she replied. And he, the stranger who somehow knew her story, spoke gently. "You are right. You have had 5 husbands, and the man you now have is not your husband." He knew the full weight of her shame, and still he stayed. Still he spoke. Still he offered living water. The woman at the well, nameless to history, became the first to hear him declare openly, "I am the Messiah." She dropped her jar, forgot her shame, and ran back to the village that had shunned her, ran with a heart spilling over with a new kind of hope. "Come, see a man who told me everything I ever did," she cried. And because of her, because of the woman who once hid from the sun, many came to know the light of the world. Beloved, what shame weighs down your heart tonight? What jars of sorrow have you carried alone for too long? Hear this. He knows, he sees, and he stays. You are not defined by your past. You are not chained to your old wells of thirst. Tonight, he offers you living water. You need only ask. Drop your jar, run into his arms, and never thirst again. Beyond the stone walls of cities, out where the earth cracked under the noonday sun, there stood a well, ancient, deep, forgotten by many, but vital to those who still traveled the dusty paths. And one day, under the harsh glare of noon, a woman came to draw water. Most came early in the morning or late in the evening, when the heat was gentler and the crowds kinder, but she came when no one else would be there. The whispers followed her like shadows. 5 husbands, shame woven into the hem of her dress, too heavy to shake off. She lowered her jar into the dark mouth of the well, perhaps grateful for the solitude. But that day she was not alone. A man sat nearby, a Jewish man, and to her astonishment, he spoke. "Will you give me a drink?" The woman blinked, confusion flickering across her face. Jews did not speak to Samaritans. Men did not speak to women alone. Strangers did not offer kindness to the broken. And yet there he sat, no judgment in his eyes, no ridicule in his voice. She challenged him, wary, sharp from years of survival. "You are a Jew, and I am a Samaritan woman. How can you ask me for a drink?" But Jesus was not deterred. "If you knew the gift of God," he said, "and who it is that asks you for a drink, you would have asked him, and he would have given you living water." Living water. The words shimmered in the heat, strange and beautiful. She clung to the practical. "You have nothing to draw with. The well is deep," but he was speaking of a deeper thirst. "Everyone who drinks this water will be thirsty again," he said. "But whoever drinks the water I give them will never thirst." Her heart, parched from years of longing and disappointment, cracked open just a little. "Sir, give me this water," she whispered. And then, with a tenderness sharper than any sword, Jesus peeled back the layers she had wrapped around herself. "Go, call your husband." Her throat tightened. "I have no husband," she replied. And he, the stranger who somehow knew her story, spoke gently. "You are right. You have had 5 husbands, and the man you now have is not your husband." He knew the full weight of her shame, and still he stayed. Still he spoke. Still he offered living water. The woman at the well, nameless to history, became the first to hear him declare openly, "I am the Messiah." She dropped her jar, forgot her shame, and ran back to the village that had shunned her, ran with a heart spilling over with a new kind of hope. "Come, see a man who told me everything I ever did," she cried. And because of her, because of the woman who once hid from the sun, many came to know the light of the world. Beloved, what shame weighs down your heart tonight? What jars of sorrow have you carried alone for too long? Hear this: He knows, He sees, and He stays. You are not defined by your past. You are not chained to your old wells of thirst. Tonight, He offers you living water. You need only ask. Drop your jar, run into His arms, and never thirst again. Far from the noise of cities and the clamor of kingdoms, there stood a man under a canopy of stars so vast it swallowed the breath from his lungs. Once called Abram, once rooted in a familiar land and familiar gods, he had left it all behind at a single whispered call. Go from your country, your people, and your father's household to the land I will show you. No map, no assurances, only a promise wrapped in mystery. I will make you into a great nation, and all peoples on earth will be blessed through you. Now many years later, Abraham stood under the desert sky, old beyond his dreams, with no sun to show for it. The promises felt heavy. The fulfillment felt impossibly far. In the darkness, he cried out to God, "Sovereign Lord, what can you give me since I remain childless?" And God, gentle, patient, drew him outside the tent. "Look up at the sky and count the stars, if indeed you can count them." Abraham tilted his head back. The heavens blazed with innumerable lights, each one a diamond hung by the hand of the Almighty. "So shall your offspring be," God said. And somehow, though nothing around him had changed, something inside Abraham shifted. He believed, not because the evidence was there, not because he could see the end of the road. He believed because he knew the one who had spoken. And the scriptures say, Abraham believed the Lord, and it was credited to him as righteousness. Beloved, how often do you find yourself beneath your own endless sky, staring up at promises yet unfulfilled? How often does the weight stretch longer than your hope can seem to bear? Tonight, let Abraham's story settle into your weary bones. Faith is not about seeing the path clearly. Faith is about trusting the one who leads you through the unseen. God did not call Abraham to understand. He called him to follow. And step by halting step, stumble by stumble, Abraham became the father of a nation. The same voice that called him calls you tonight. Maybe you don't see the road ahead. Maybe the promises feel too big for your small heart. But look up. Count the stars if you can. Each one is a reminder that the promises of God are not fragile dreams. They are anchors set deep into eternity. Your faith, trembling, questioning, stretching into the night, is seen. It is enough. It is beautiful to Him. Tonight, stand beneath the vastness of His promises. Breathe deep and believe again, because the one who promised is faithful, and every star is proof that He keeps His word. After the world had shattered, after the cross had been raised and the tomb sealed, two men walked a dusty road away from Jerusalem. Their hearts were heavy. Their hopes, once burning bright, now hung like ashes around their shoulders. Cleopas and his companion trudged the path toward Emmaus. 7 miles of sorrow stretched before them. Everything they had believed seemed to have crumbled. The Messiah they had followed, the one who was supposed to redeem Israel, had been crucified like a common criminal. And now rumors swirled. Some women claimed to have seen angels. Some whispered of an empty tomb. But the men walking the Emmaus road carried only questions, only grief. Their voices rose and fell as they tried to make sense of it all, the sadness thick between them. And then a stranger joined them. He walked alongside them, matching their pace, as if he had always belonged there. "What are you discussing together as you walk along?" he asked. They stopped, faces etched with disbelief. "Are you the only one visiting Jerusalem who does not know the things that have happened there in these days?" "What things?" the stranger asked gently. And so they poured it out, the dreams dashed, the sorrow heavy, the confusion thick. They spoke of Jesus of Nazareth, the prophet powerful in word and deed, condemned and crucified. "But we had hoped," Cleopas said, the three words that hung heavier than any others. "We had hoped." Hope past tense, hope buried with him in the tomb. The stranger listened, patient, kind, and then he spoke. He opened the scriptures to them, weaving through the ancient words, showing how all of it, the suffering, the cross, the sorrow, had always been part of the plan. Their hearts began to burn within them, a warmth they could not explain. When they reached the village, they urged him to stay. "Stay with us," they pleaded, "for it is nearly evening. The day is almost over." And so he did. At the table, he took bread, he gave thanks, he broke it, and in the breaking, their eyes were opened. They knew him. It was Jesus, alive, with them. Before they could speak, he disappeared from their sight. But the fire he had reignited blazed stronger than ever. They rose at once, forgetting their weariness, forgetting their sorrow, and raced back to Jerusalem, back to the others, back to the beginning of a new hope. Beloved, maybe tonight you too are walking an Emmaus road. Maybe sorrow clings to your heart. Maybe hope feels like a story someone else once told. But listen, you are not walking alone. Even when you do not recognize him, even when the way feels long and the night feels cold, he walks beside you. He listens to your sorrows. He bears your questions. He patiently kindles the fire of faith again. Tonight, invite him in. Ask him to stay and watch. In the breaking of your fears, in the breaking of your loneliness, how your eyes will be opened once more. Hope is not dead. Hope walks beside you, always. Behind the towering gates of a vast Persian palace, where marble floors gleamed and golden torches burned through endless nights, a queen stood trembling. She was draped in royal robes, but beneath the silken jewels, her heart beat with the fierce terror of one who knew how fragile her position truly was. For though she wore a crown, she had not forgotten who she was, an orphan girl, a daughter of exile, a soul hidden and preserved for such a time as this. The law was clear. No one approached the king unbidden, not even the queen. To do so was to risk death, unless the king extended his golden scepter in mercy. And yet, death already loomed over her people. An evil decree had gone out, an edict of destruction against the Jews scattered across the empire, and Esther alone held a place near the heart of power. When her cousin Mordecai sent word, urging her to intercede, she hesitated. "If I perish, she whispered at last. And so, after days of fasting and prayer, Esther stepped into the inner court of the palace, her every breath a prayer, her every step an act of defiant faith. The king sat on his great throne, cloaked in authority. He looked up, and in a moment that reshaped history, he extended the golden scepter toward her. Mercy, access, life. "What is it, Queen Esther?" he asked. "What is your request? Even up to half the kingdom, it will be given you." But Esther did not rush. She did not fling her heart forward recklessly. She moved with wisdom, with patience, unfolding her plan across banquets and conversations, waiting for the perfect moment. And when it came, she spoke. "If I have found favor in your eyes, O king, and if it pleases you, grant me my life. This is my petition, and spare my people. This is my request." The truth shattered the lies that had wrapped themselves around the court. The wicked plot was exposed, and the people who had faced certain death were granted life instead, all because one woman, hidden, ordinary, unlikely, chose courage over fear. Beloved, maybe tonight you feel small before the vastness of what you face. Maybe you tremble at the threshold of something you do not feel strong enough to step into. Remember Esther, it is not your strength that makes the difference. It is your willingness to trust the one who placed you exactly where you are, at exactly this moment in history. And who knows, Mordecai said, but that you have come to your royal position for such a time as this. Tonight, wherever you are, however hidden or insignificant you may feel, you are seen, you are chosen, you are called. The golden scepter of grace is extended toward you. The throne room of heaven stands open before you. Step forward, beloved. Speak with the courage born of faith. Because when God writes your story, even the smallest act of bravery can change the course of the world. The valley stretched wide and empty under a heavy, watchful sky. On one side, the armies of Israel, on the other, the forces of the Philistines, and in between, silence, broken only by the taunts of a giant, Goliath. Clad in armor that gleamed like a second skin, he roared defiance across the valley day after day, his voice shaking the hearts of even the bravest men. Who could stand against him? Who could hope to survive? And yet, from the hills where sheep grazed peacefully came a boy, too young to wear armor, too small to wield a sword, sent by his father not to fight, but to deliver bread and check on his brothers. But when David heard the giant's mocking cries, something inside him flared. Not pride, not recklessness, righteous anger, faith stronger than fear. Who is this uncircumcised Philistine, he asked, that he should defy the armies of the living God? Word reached King Saul, and soon David stood before him, a boy facing the terror of a nation. You are not able to go out against this Philistine and fight him, Saul said. You are only a young man. But David spoke not of his youth. He spoke of lions and bears. He spoke of battles fought in secret places, where no crowds cheered and no songs were sung. The Lord who rescued me from the paw of the lion and the paw of the bear will rescue me from the hand of this Philistine. And so David refused the king's armor. He chose instead what he knew, a sling, 5 smooth stones, and the name of the Lord. He stepped into the valley, alone, but never truly alone. Goliath laughed when he saw him. Am I a dog, he sneered, that you come at me with sticks? But David stood firm. You come against me with sword and spear and javelin, he cried. But I come against you in the name of the Lord Almighty, the God of the armies of Israel, whom you have defied. And with one smooth stone, one act of defiant faith, the giant fell. Beloved, what giants stand in your valley tonight? What voices roar across the empty spaces of your heart, mocking your hope, belittling your strength? Remember David, victory was never about size. It was never about weapons or armor. It was about faith. It was about trust in a God bigger than any giant. The same God who guided the stone from David's sling guides you now. The same strength that steadied his hand steadies your trembling spirit. You do not need to match your enemy's power. You need only trust the one who fights for you. Tonight, pick up your stone. Face the giant. And remember, the battle is not yours, it belongs to the Lord. And giants, no matter how loud, no matter how towering, fall before him, always. Along a winding road lined with dust and regret, a boy trudged home. Once he had run down this same road with laughter in his throat, and the weight of his inheritance heavy in his purse, dreams in his eyes. freedom in his hands. But freedom, apart from the Father's house, had turned to chains. The riches had vanished faster than the setting sun. The friends had scattered like leaves in the wind, and the boy, once proud and wild, now found himself feeding pigs, longing even for the scraps tossed to the animals. It was in that low place, knees sunk into mud, stomach twisted in hunger, that a single, fragile thought broke through. I will go back to the Father, not as a son. He had given up any right to that, but perhaps as a servant. Anything would be better than this slow death in a far country. And so he rose. Each step homeward was heavy with shame, each mile another weight pressing down on his heart. He rehearsed his apology over and over. Father, I have sinned against heaven and against you. I am no longer worthy to be called your son. But before he could reach the gates, before he could even glimpse the rooftops of home, he saw, running toward him, a figure, not cold, not angry, running, the Father, robes gathered in his fists, feet pounding the earth, tears streaming down a face lined with love and longing. He threw his arms around the boy, pulling the filth and the brokenness close to his heart. The son began to stammer out his apology, words choked with shame. But the Father wasn't listening. He was already calling for the servants. Quick, bring the best robe and put it on him. Put a ring on his finger and sandals on his feet. Bring the fattened calf and kill it. Let's have a feast and celebrate. For this son of mine was dead and is alive again. He was lost and is found. And so the celebration began, not because the son had earned it, not because he had paid back his debts, but because he had come home. Beloved, how many times have you stood at the edge of return, too ashamed to lift your eyes? How many times have you rehearsed apologies, believing yourself too broken, too filthy to be welcomed back? Hear this tonight. The Father is not waiting with arms crossed. He is running toward you. He is not counting your failures. He is counting the steps you take back into his arms. Your worth was never in what you could offer. It was never in how perfectly you could stay. Your worth has always been in his love, unchanging, unshakable, unbreakable. Tonight, drop your rehearsed speeches, drop your shame, lift your eyes. See the Father running toward you, cloak billowing, ring shining, voice singing over your return. You are not a servant, you are a son, you are a daughter, and the party has already begun. Come home, beloved, come home. The prison was cold, the walls slick with damp, the iron bars heavy with rust. In the deepest part of the cell, far from the light of day, two men sat chained, Paul and Silas. They had not stolen, they had not harmed, they had only spoken words of life, and for that they had been beaten and bound. Their backs ached, their wrists were raw, the darkness pressed in thick and merciless. If ever there was a moment to despair, it was now. But instead of curses, instead of cries for vengeance, something else rose up from the depth of the dungeon. A song, soft at first, trembling and low, but growing stronger with every verse. Hymns of praise, words of worship, songs of freedom, sung by chained men in the heart of a prison. The other prisoners listened, breathless, eyes wide in the dark. And then, as if heaven itself bent low to listen, the earth trembled, the very foundations of the prison shook. Chains fell, doors swung open. The walls that had held them captive could not withstand the power of a praise that refused to be silenced. The jailer, roused from sleep by the earthquake, drew his sword in terror. Surely the prisoners had fled, and his life would be forfeit. But Paul called out, "Do not harm yourself. We are all here." And the jailer, trembling, fell before them and cried, "Sirs, what must I do to be saved?" That very night, The man who had once locked them in chains was washed clean by the river of grace. He and his household were baptized before the sun even had a chance to rise. Beloved, hear this. Freedom is not found in open doors. Freedom is not found in broken chains. Freedom is found in a heart that chooses to praise even in the darkest hour. You may find yourself tonight feeling bound by fear, by sorrow, by the heavy hands of circumstance. The midnight may press close. The chains may feel real. But praise, even whispered, even broken, shatters the deepest prisons. It is not the absence of trouble that proves your faith. It is the song you choose to sing when the trouble surrounds you. Tonight, lift your voice, even if it trembles, even if the tears blur the words. Lift it anyway. Sing in your midnight. Sing through your chains. Because the God who shook the prison for Paul and Silas is the same God who stands with you now. The walls cannot hold you. The darkness cannot silence you. The enemy cannot defeat a heart that praises in the face of pain. Your song is stronger than you know. And even now, even here, freedom is breaking in. The wind howled across the barren cliffs of Mount Horeb, tearing at the rocks, screaming through the ravines. And in a cave near the summit, a man sat with his head bowed low, wrapped in the heavy cloak of despair. Elijah, the prophet who had called fire from heaven, who had faced down kings and false prophets, now trembled not from fear of men, but from the heavy, crushing weight of loneliness. He had run far, far from Jezebel's threats, far from the people he could not change, far from the burden that felt too heavy to carry anymore. "I have had enough, Lord," he had cried out days before. "Take my life." And yet, God had sustained him, sent angels to feed him, strengthened his weary legs for the journey. Now here, alone on the mountain, Elijah waited, longing for answers, longing for something, anything, that would make the pain make sense. A voice called to him, "Go out and stand on the mountain, in the presence of the Lord, for the Lord is about to pass by." And so Elijah waited. First came a mighty wind, tearing through the cliffs, scattering stones like dry leaves. But the Lord was not in the wind. Then came an earthquake, the ground itself shuddering and breaking apart. But the Lord was not in the earthquake. After the earthquake came fire, roaring, consuming, devouring everything in its path. But the Lord was not in the fire. And then, after the wind, the earthquake, the fire, came a whisper, a still, small voice, soft enough that it could be missed if one's heart was not listening. And Elijah, battered and trembling, wrapped his cloak around his face and stepped out, because he knew God was there, not in the fury, not in the destruction, but in the quiet, in the whisper. "What are you doing here, Elijah?" the voice asked, not with condemnation, but with deep, aching compassion. And Elijah poured out his heart, his loneliness, his fear, his frustration, that no matter how hard he tried, the world seemed unchanged. And God, gentle and sure, did not shame him. He gave him rest. He gave him purpose. He reminded him he was not alone, that there were still thousands who had not bowed to false gods. And he sent Elijah forward, not with thunder, but with quiet strength. Beloved, maybe tonight you too are waiting for God to show up in fire and fury. Maybe you expect him to tear apart the sky and shout down answers into your confusion. But listen closely. More often, he comes in the whisper, in the stillness, in the quiet breath that brushes against your weary soul, not because he is weak, but because he is close, close enough to speak softly, close enough to catch every tear, close enough to hold you when the winds rage and the fires burn. Tonight, find him in the silence. Lean in. Listen, he is speaking, not with condemnation, but with love deeper than the deepest storm. You are not alone. You are never alone. and the voice that called Elijah out of the cave now calls gently to you. Come, beloved, I am here. The morning sun crept slowly over the hills, spilling gold across fields heavy with grain. And there, kneeling between the stalks, hands rough from work, heart worn from sorrow, was Ruth, a foreigner, a widow, a woman who had lost almost everything, and yet she remained. When her husband died, when her world unraveled, she could have returned to her homeland, to the comfort of familiar gods and familiar ways. But love held her fast. Love for Naomi, the mother-in-law, who had also lost everything. Love for the God of Israel, whom she had chosen to follow into an unknown future. Where you go, I will go, Ruth had said. Your people will be my people, and your God, my God. Now miles from the home she once knew, Ruth bent low among strangers' fields, gathering leftover stalks of grain. It was humble work, the work of the overlooked, the work of the desperate. And yet, woven through the dust and the sweat and the bending low, was something holy, because in the very field where Ruth humbled herself, redemption was already walking toward her. Boaz, a man of kindness, a man of strength, a man who saw not a foreigner, not a beggar, but a woman of courage and loyalty. He instructed his workers to leave extra grain behind for her. He spoke gently to her. He provided safety for her. He opened the door for something Ruth could not have imagined that morning when she rose with the sun. A future, a hope, a place once more in the unfolding story of God's people. In time, Ruth would marry Boaz. She would bear a son, Obed, and from her line would come King David. And generations later, the Messiah himself. All because one woman, grieving and small and faithful, chose to stay, chose to bend low, chose to believe that even in brokenness, God could still write redemption. Beloved, maybe tonight you feel like Ruth, gathering scraps, bending low, walking forward with nothing but stubborn hope, clutched tightly to your heart. Hear this: the God who wove Ruth's story into the tapestry of salvation is weaving yours too. The small acts of faith you make today, the loyalty, the kindness, the quiet prayers, are not lost. They are seeds buried deep in his fields, seeds that will one day blossom into more than you can imagine. You do not have to see the full picture. You do not have to understand the whole road. You have only to take the next step, to bend low, to trust that in the ordinary, God is doing the extraordinary. Tonight, the fields may feel lonely. The harvest may seem small, but redemption is nearer than you know, and his hand, always unseen, always sure, is guiding you home. The walls were cold. The light barely touched the damp stone floors. Chains clinked softly in the shadows, and somewhere in the midst of that forgotten darkness, Joseph sat. Once, he had dreamed of greatness. Dreams given by God himself, visions of sheaves bowing and stars bending low. He had believed them, but the road to those dreams had twisted sharply, betrayed by his own brothers, sold like a possession, dragged across foreign soil into a land that did not know his name or his God. He had risen once, briefly, in the house of Potiphar, trusted, honored, and then lies, false accusations, chains once more. Now the dreams must have felt like distant, fading memories. Would they ever come true? Had he misunderstood them entirely? Day after day, the prison walls closed in. The voices of despair whispered louder, but Joseph did not let bitterness take root. Even there, in the forgotten places, he served faithfully. He interpreted the dreams of fellow prisoners. He spoke truth even when it seemed to lead nowhere. He waited, not passively, but with a heart still turned toward heaven, still believing somehow, somewhere, God's story was not finished. And in time, in a single day, everything changed. Pharaoh's dreams troubled him, dreams no one could explain, and Joseph was remembered. He was summoned. He stood before the most powerful man in the world, a slave, a prisoner, and spoke with the authority of one who walked with God. And Pharaoh, recognizing the wisdom that flowed from him, lifted Joseph from the dust to the highest seat in the land, second only to the throne itself. The dreams were not dead. They had only been planted deeper than Joseph had ever known, growing slowly, silently, until the time was right. And through Joseph, not only his family, but entire nations were saved. Beloved, maybe tonight you sit in your own prison of dreams. Maybe the promises once bright have dimmed with the weight of waiting. Maybe betrayal, loss, or silence have made you wonder if you heard him wrong. Hear this: God's dreams are never fragile. They are never abandoned. They are buried deep, growing roots unseen until the day they burst into life. The prison is not your end. The chains are not your identity. They are only part of the soil from which your purpose will bloom. Tonight, trust again. Serve where you are. Hold fast to the dreams he planted in you, because the God who remembered Joseph in the prison will remember you too. And when the doors open, when the light floods in, you will find that nothing was wasted. Not a single tear, not a single prayer, not a single moment. The dream lives, because the dream giver never forgets his own. The night sky stretched endless and black above the restless sea. The wind howled, tugging at cloaks and hair, and the small boat creaked and groaned against the waves. The disciples strained at the oars, muscles burning, hearts pounding with fear. And then, out across the dark waters, something moved. A figure, walking, not stumbling or swimming, but walking atop the waves as if they were solid ground. Terror seized them. "It's a ghost," they cried. But the figure, calm against the raging storm, spoke. "Take courage. It is I. Don't be afraid." The voice, steady, familiar, filled with a peace deeper than the sea itself, was unmistakable. It was Jesus. And Peter, always the boldest, always the first to leap, called out, "Lord, if it's you, tell me to come to you on the water." And Jesus, without hesitation, said, "Come." Peter stepped over the side. For a moment, one breathtaking, miraculous moment, his feet found solid purchase on the shifting sea. Step by step, he walked toward the master of the winds. But then, the wind howled louder, the waves leapt higher, the terror clawed at his heart. Peter looked away from Jesus, and in that instant, fear swallowed faith. He began to sink. "Lord, save me," he cried, arms flailing, lungs filling with salt and panic. Immediately, not after hesitation, not with rebuke, Jesus reached out his hand and caught him. "You of little faith," he said gently, "why did you doubt?" And together they climbed back into the boat. The wind died, the sea stilled, and the disciples, hearts still hammering, bowed down before him, whispering, "Truly, you are the Son of God." Beloved, how many times have you dared to step out in faith, only to feel yourself sinking the moment fear whispers louder than trust? How often have you begun with courage, only to find yourself overwhelmed by the storms? Hear this tonight. It was not Peter's perfect faith that saved him. It was Jesus' perfect grip. It was not the strength of Peter's belief that calmed the storm. It was the nearness of the Savior. You will stumble. You will sink. You will have moments when the waves seem taller than his promises, but he will always reach for you, immediately, without hesitation. without anger, because his love is not measured by the steadiness of your steps, but by the steadfastness of his heart. Tonight, the winds may howl, the waters may rage, but if you dare to step out, even trembling, you will find a hand waiting for you, a hand stronger than the storm, a hand scarred by love, a hand that will never let you go. Fix your eyes again on him. Step forward, and when you sink, because at times you will know that his grace is deeper than the deepest sea. You are not alone. You are never beyond his reach. And even now, he calls to you across the waters. Take courage. It is I. Don't be afraid. The temple courts buzzed with quiet footsteps and murmured prayers. Smoke from the altar curled into the warm air, carrying with it the whispered hopes of 1,000 aching hearts. Among them knelt a woman, Hannah. She was not rich. She was not powerful. She was a soul stretched thin by sorrow, a heart bruised by years of waiting and wanting. Year after year she had come here. Year after year she had cried until the tears ran dry. Year after year she had left with empty arms. Others mocked her. Even her own family misunderstood her pain. But Hannah had not given up. This year, this quiet, unremarkable year, she knelt again before the Lord. And this time she prayed not with loud cries, but with the silent trembling of her lips, the silent breaking of her heart. No one heard her voice, but heaven heard her soul. Lord Almighty, she prayed in the hidden places of her spirit, if you will only look on your servant's misery and remember me, then I will give my son to the Lord for all the days of his life. She asked, not from entitlement, but from desperate, surrendered trust. The priest Eli saw her moving lips and thought she was drunk. He rebuked her harshly. Another misunderstanding heaped onto her already heavy heart. But Hannah, tears shining in her eyes, answered simply, I am a woman who is deeply troubled. I was pouring out my soul to the Lord. And Eli, moved by something deeper than appearances, spoke a blessing, Go in peace, and may the God of Israel grant you what you have asked of him. And somehow, even before the answer came, even before the womb was filled and the cradle was rocked, Hannah's heart found peace. She rose and went on her way, and her face was no longer downcast. In time, her prayer was answered. A son was born, Samuel, who would grow to be a mighty prophet, a voice that would shape the course of nations. But the true miracle had begun long before the birth. It had begun in the unseen, in the silent places where hope still whispered, where surrender sang louder than despair. Beloved, maybe tonight your prayers feel silent too. Maybe you kneel with lips moving and no sound strong enough to break through the noise of the world. Maybe you wonder if heaven even notices. Hear this. He sees, he hears, he remembers. Not one sigh is wasted. Not one tear falls unnoticed. You do not have to pray with perfect words. You do not have to shout to be heard. You need only pour out your heart and trust that the one who formed you from dust knows how to cradle even your most fragile hopes. Tonight, pray again. Whisper if you must. Kneel if you can. But know this, the God who met Hannah in her silent prayer is still listening now, and his answers, whether they come swiftly or slowly, are always woven with perfect love. You are not forgotten. Your silent prayers shake heaven itself. The hills roll softly beneath the evening sky, the last golden rays of sunlight spilling over the fields like a blessing. And there, moving quietly among the tall grasses, walks the shepherd. He knows each rise and hollow, each thorny place, each hidden spring, every path worn smooth by the tread of wandering feet. And more than the land, he knows his sheep, each one by name. not by number, not by usefulness, by heart. He knows the timid ones who shrink from every shadow. He knows the stubborn ones who stray again and again. He knows the wounded ones who limp quietly behind the rest. He knows the wild ones who rush ahead into brambles and rocks. He knows you, and when just one goes missing, he does not sigh in frustration. He does not wait for the sheep to find its way back. He goes, through thorns, across rivers. He searches. His voice echoes through the valleys. Come home. The lost sheep may not even know it is lost. It may not recognize the path. It may not even believe it deserves to be found. But still, he searches. Still, he calls, until, at last, through the confusion, through the fear, the sheep hears his voice. And the shepherd, laughing with relief and joy, lifts the trembling creature onto his shoulders, not scolding, not punishing, carrying, celebrating. Rejoice with me, he cries, for I have found my lost sheep. Beloved, tonight, wherever you are, whether you feel close to the fold or far off in tangled places, the Good Shepherd is calling your name. He knows the dreams you've buried. He knows the scars you hide. He knows the battles you've fought silently, the prayers you've whispered into the dark. And still, he comes. Not with anger, not with shame, with arms strong enough to carry you, with a heart gentle enough to heal you. You do not have to find your way back alone. You need only listen. His voice cuts through the noise, through the lies, through the fear. Come home, not because you have earned it, not because you have made yourself worthy, because you are his, because you always have been. Tonight, rest on his shoulders. Let him carry you through the thorns. Let him sing over you as the night falls. You are not forgotten in the wilderness. You are not too broken to be gathered back into his arms. You are the joy set before him. You are the one he left the 99 to find. And in his embrace, you will find not judgment, but peace. Not rejection, but belonging. Not condemnation, but the song of a shepherd who never stops loving, never stops calling, never stops coming. You are his, forever.